Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Laura. Today I feel like talking to you about the 10 fantasy books I've tried so far this year. And I say tried because out of the 10 of them, I actually DNF one of them. I thought about just talking to you about the really good ones that you should spend your time with. But then I realized one, some of them are not really bad, they are just not for me. And two, some of these books are booktube's favorite books and they didn't really work for me, so I thought maybe I'm saving someone from actually spending and wasting time on those books. Without further introduction, let's start with the first book that is going to be Grace of Kings. To be honest, this book feels like historical fiction because the fantasy here is very low and it's not really important, at least in the first book. I think for a debut the writing was really good. My problem with this book was that it's very action driven. I understand that a lot of people hate when fantasy books start very slow and have a lot of info dump. In this case, I thought the beginning was the strongest part of the book. It's really hard to make a fantasy book where the first chapters are giving you so many plot twists and you're so interested to keep reading about the book. But as soon as the first chapters ended and I realized that I wasn't connected with any character, I started to lose interest. If you're not someone who needs a character driving a story and you like kind of historical fiction books that are actually fantasy books, but the fantasy is like more in the background, maybe you'll enjoy this one more than I did. For me, I felt like the characters were used and then discharged when the author didn't need them anymore in a really obvious way. I felt like I could see how the author made the dots connecting everything and it made it quite predictable. For example, there is this character who needs to marry a woman and in the next chapter, he finds a woman. They are going to marry. I feel like yes, it's very useful for the plot to go forward all the time because every time they need something they will find it, but it makes it so predictable. Other than that, I was also very angry about there are a couple of characters I actually like it, but there was this girl who was very good at strategy games and she wanted to be able to be part of the political parties too, even though she was a woman, and she had so many ideas about feminism, even though it's like a very ancient book. So I was really into her character, and then the author decided to make her fall in love with the most misogynistic character in the entire book. And there's this kind of things that keep putting me out of the book instead of making me connect with it more and more. So I don't think I'm going to be continuing the series. If you have heard a lot of good things about this book, as I have, I'm not saying they're wrong, I'm just saying that maybe if you feel like me and you need character-driven stories, maybe this is not the book for you. The next are two books, the second and the third book of Blood and Bone, which are A Time of Blood and A Time of Courage. Instead of talking about book 2 and 3, I'll be talking about the whole trilogy that is of Blood and Bone. I'm going to compare this series with the other series I read by Gwynne, which is The Faithful and the Fallen, being the first book, Malice. This series is going to be a bit more action-packed than The Faithful and the Fallen. They have less characters, so I know a lot of people are a bit afraid of Malice because you have dozens of POV you have to be following. In this case, you only follow 4 or 5 POVs, which makes it more easy-friendly for the reader. I know the author said that you technically can read it separately without having read The Faithful and the Fallen, but you are going to miss so many things if you pick this up before reading the other one. The big battle at the end of The Faithful and the Fallen is the whole point of this series. That being said, if you have read The Faithful and the Fallen, I think you should try this series too. It's a bit more action driven, it has a lot of battle scenes. Gwynne is the only author who is able to make me read 200 pages of battle scenes. And it's because he actually tries to make them work in real life. Like he goes with his sons and they try to recreate the scenes he's writing about on his books, and it just shows because you're reading the scenes and they play on your mind like a movie. Other than the battle scenes, Gwynne is also very well known for doing very good characters. You have a lot of characters, every single one of them is different. I really love that he adds a tiny bit of humor on his books, because even though it's not much, sometimes when you're reading fantasy books, you don't have any kind of humor in any point of the book. I really appreciate that in this case there was one secondary character that didn't appear much. When he appeared, I always end up with a smile on my face because he was so much fun to be around. Then I read Iron Widow, which is the only book that is not shelved as an adult fantasy. I think it's shelved as a young adult fantasy romance or something like that. It's one of those books that you read extremely fast. It took me 1-2 days to read it, but when you finish it, you feel like you're actually disappointed about what you have just read, because Iron Widow for me was extremely predictable in everything. You're following a heroine who is a typical very angry heroine who just wants to take revenge because her sister has just been killed. The magic system is super interesting because basically they have these mechanical birds they have to drive, and these mechanical birds are used to fight another fantasy animal. So these drivers are really important in this society, and the main character decided to be part of that. I'm someone who loves ambitious heroines, but I quickly realized this is another stereotypical character, and every single one of the characters in this book, you're going to meet them and you are instantly going to know them, and that is a huge red flag for me, because if you know a character as soon as you have 1-2 scenes about them, they're not really well done, because you cannot know a person, you cannot predict what a person is going to do just by talking with them 1 time or 2 times. The problem is that predictable wasn't only for the characters. For me, the entire plot was extremely predictable. I figured out the big plot twist from the very beginning. I started this book, I was like, this is going to happen, and it happened. I think anybody who knows humans just a tiny bit will figure it out what is going to happen in the end. I appreciate what the author was trying to do, but I wasn't really convinced about the execution. Then I have She Who Became the Sun. This is another Asian inspiring book. It's kind of like Grace of Kings, but in this case it is completely character driven. It's also set in China in 1345. It is inspired by an actual emperor in China who is said was a woman. So you're following Chu. I'm going to be using she, her pronouns because those were the pronouns the author used. Chu is a girl who is in a very poor village. She is the only girl left on the village, because we will give food to a girl when you can feed your son instead. She's still alive because she's really good at getting her own food. She's just really good at getting what she wants in general. So the thing is that they go to this place when they are telling her brother, the only brother she has left, his fortune. And the person who reads his fortune is actually super shocked because her brother is going to be great. He's going to do things that are going to be remembered forever. The thing is that her brother dies, and she is like, I can be my brother. I can behave like my brother. I can become a man and achieve the great path my brother had on his blood. It's a character again moved by this desire to be great, which kind of reminds me of Rim from the Poppy War, which is one of my all-time favorite heroines to follow. The problem with Chu, and it's a problem I saw like in the 80% of the book, for me this book was a really 4.5 stars until the last part of the book, where I realized I was starting to predict a lot of things. Basically, my problem with Chu was that she always got what she wanted. You know, when you are following a character, and yes, they take a lot of sacrifices, but the plot keeps going the same way the character wants it to go. So imagine there is this whole thing the character wants to do, and they have a plan, and that plan fails, but they still end up having that thing, just that they will need another plan and they will have to sacrifice whatever to find it. I just like when sometimes characters, even though they try and sacrifice things and they do a lot of plans, they don't achieve what they want to achieve. Because in that case, every time we are going into battle, I don't know if they're actually going to win. The other problem is that the whole book is a huge spoiler because, you know, it's based on an actual emperor in China, and that is Chu. So you kind of know what's going to happen with Chu at the very end. That's the problem with historical fiction. Because this book kind of reads as a historical fiction, the fantasy again is very on the background. That's why I thought it was like Grace of Kings, but character driven. And then you're also following another POV that is Ojan's POV. Ojan's POV was pain. That's the reason why people are comparing this with the Song of Achilles. He basically is a slave and his whole family was killed by someone. And that someone is the father of the person he serves, and that person is his best friend and the person he's in love with. So basically he's gay. He has to revenge his family. But to revenge his family, he has to betray the love of his life. And the love of his life doesn't realize any of this. Then he just lives in a magical world where he and Ojan can be best friends forever and go into battle together. He doesn't even realize Ojan has feelings for him. So it's pain. Like reading this POV, to be honest, it was amazing, but at the same time it's like, this is going to hurt so much at the end, and it did hurt so much at the end. I really enjoy Ojan's POV. The thing with these characters is that all of them are going to do horrible things. So if you don't like great characters, don't pick this up. And if you don't like character driving stories, because the beginning of the book was very slow. But if you do like following a character that is very twisted, maybe this book will work for you too. Then I have Tress of the Emerald Sea, which is not my cup of tea. I never ever read cozy fantasy or light-hearted fantasy. If I want something that light, I will just go and watch anime or a Ghibli movie. But for those who like cozy fantasies, this one was so good, because even me, who is not into them, ended up loving the book so much. Especially the ending makes you want to read the whole thing and search for all the clues you missed. Basically, you're following Tress, who is a very pragmatic woman who lives in an island, and she's very poor, and she is in love with Charles, who is the son of the duke. So they have like a romance going on that is completely forbidden and it's going nowhere. But they are young and they are in love, and Charlie is sent to another place to find a proper wife for him. He promised Tress, I'm going to be the most boring person on earth, so I'm going to go back to you because nobody's going to want to marry me. His plan doesn't work, and his father ends up being tired of him, and he finds another heir and sends Charles with the sorceress, which is like a bad witch, and nobody has been able to escape her. So Tress knows that she's the only one who can actually save Charlie, so she ends up in this ship with a lot of people around there. The secondary characters were hilarious. This whole book reads like a comedy. It's like being in this super magical world where you have a sea that is not made of water, you have a magic system that is so cool, and so many things going on. To be honest, just thinking about this book makes me smile. So if you want something lighthearted and fun and full of comedy, highly recommend this book. Even if it's not really my cup of tea, I still appreciate. The next book is Black Sun. This case, I have a big problem with it, is that I couldn't connect with the writing, which means I couldn't connect with any of the characters, but I didn't really have any problem with the book. The world building was very interesting because it's inspired on pre-Columbian America civilizations, which is a first for me. I've been reading a lot of Asian-inspiring books, and I mean, most of the fantasy are European-inspired, so it was really nice having something different for once. The characters were really different, were really well made, even if I couldn't connect or care about any, which I think is the most important part of a book. But if you can't connect with the writing, this book is really good. The plot is really good. There are a lot of things happening, but it doesn't feel rushed. It just feels that you need to keep reading all the time. Like, the only reason why I didn't DNF this book, because if I don't care about the characters, it's going to be a DNF for me. In this case, I couldn't, because the suspense was killing me. It was so good. I keep wanted to know what the author was going to do with everything that was happening. So if you like suspense books that make you want to keep reading, I will highly recommend this book. The next book is Bond. It's a novella. It's book 2.5 on Book of the Ancestor Trilogy by Mark Lawrence. This is the first book. If you didn't know, this is my all-time favorite series, and for some reason I skipped the novellas, kind of without meaning to, because since the books I always bought them on physical, I tend to forget to get the ebooks and read the novellas. So I read them this year and I loved it so much. I will talk about the trilogy in general, because talking just about the novella doesn't make a lot of sense. So basically, Book of the Ancestor is about assassin nuns. It's a extremely character driven book. To be honest, in the best first book, not a lot of things happening. You're just following Nona, who is an extremely unreliable character. You're going to want to know a lot more about her, because she keeps telling you that she's a complete monster, yet she keeps doing things of a very good person. It's a series where the stakes start very low, and you're just following characters as they go through different classes. It's like an academy setting, which I absolutely adore. They are so hard to find, especially because a lot of academy settings come from a very like dark academy kind of books that don't have any kind of action. And in this case, even though the action is low, there is action. As the more you read, the more action you have, and I really love that progression of first you connect with the characters and then they are going to be thrown in all these battles. It's kind of a chess game when you read the third book and you realize everything that has been going on from book one. You're going to be mind blown. I think this series is completely amazing. It has a bit of sapphic romance. I mean, there are nuns living together. Something like that is going to happen. Actually, the novella I just read has the love story because it's a story about kisses. That's all I'm going to say. So I will highly recommend not skipping the novella and trying this series. It sounds like something you may enjoy. Then I have my favorite fantasy book so far this year, which is Before They Are Hung, which is the sequel of The Blade itself. These are the books 1 and 2 in the first Law trilogy. And in this case, I'll be quick because I really reviewed this book on my July wrap-up. But this book for me is like an introduction for the characters. You don't really know what's going on. The characters don't care about what's going on, which was the only problem I had with this book. Is that, okay, the characters, amazing. I love how great they are. I love how the author is able to even put different sense of humors in them. It's one of the best characterizations I've ever seen. The dialogues were amazing. Everything was amazing. But I felt like we didn't really have anything to look forward to because the characters were just going with the flow. They were like, oh, I have to do this. Okay. And they weren't really thinking what they actually wanted to do with their lives. Whereas in this book, they start to have all the character development and they will start to stop, think, what do I want to do with my life? I loved it, and you have so many battles here and you finally understand what was happening in book 1, and it was such a great book. If you love characters as much as I love characters and you don't mind that there are going to be very great characters, highly recommend giving Joe Abercrombie a try. Even though I feel like I'm the last one on this party, it's worth it. Finally, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but the book I DNF was The Shadow of What Was Lost. I actually read this book with a friend, tried to read this book with a friend. We didn't fit both of us on 50% because we wouldn't enjoy it. I tried to be nice with debut books, but since this is a very highly popular book everyone seems to love, I'm going to give you my unhinged opinion about this, and it's that the characters weren't really well done. And my problem was not that they were just stereotypical or they were boring. No, my problem is that there were a lot of traumatic experiences going on. I never felt like you could see the impact all those things were having on the characters. And for me, it's a hard limit. I don't care if the writing isn't really good. In this case, I thought it was a bit info-dumpy at times, and also the dialogues, this drove me crazy. You always got annotations about the gestures the characters were doing while they were talking. So instead of having like the dialogues like very clear, you will have they say this and then all the annotations of what they are doing with their faces, and then they say this, and again all the annotations of what they were doing. And while I think, yes, annotations can give you a lot of information about what the author is trying to express, they are killing the pace of the dialogues, and the dialogues end up feeling very unnatural, very rigid, which is another thing I really struggle with when the dialogues aren't good in a book. But for a debut, I will be okay about that if we had the emotional impact on the characters, which we didn't have. I thought they were really, really blunt. And to be honest, I don't understand why people love this book so much, because I felt it was so action-driven that felt extremely rushed. I was confused all the time. I just didn't care about what was happening. I guess most people are not so picky about characterization, because the only booktuber I can think of that actually had the same problem as I had was Daniel Green. When I saw his review, I was like, finally I found someone who thinks the same way as I did. But still, I feel like most booktubers and just reviewers in general didn't really have this problem with the characters, which makes me feel very confused, to be honest. But well, I guess we all love different things, and maybe the emotional impact is not a very important thing for other readers as it was for me. for my friend. That was the last book I wanted to tell you about. You can let me know in the comments which was your favorite fantasy book so far this year, or your most disappointing fantasy book. I feel like I'm being so picky with fantasy. I swear, I usually really love all the fantasy books I pick. Last year I picked up Book of Ancestor, Greenbone Saga, The Faithful and the Fallen, and they were all of them so good, and I'm kind of disappointed at myself for what I'm reading this year, but hopefully it goes better. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can like and you can subscribe, and I'll see you soon in another video.